Hello, everyone. I welcome you to another episode of Grief Talk, where I have with me a very special guest and a dear friend, Tony, with me. Tony is a grief coach. And how are you today, Tony?
I'm doing well. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here with you. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. So, can you start by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your journey? Like who you are, what led to the work that you do today?
Of course, my name is Tony Lynch. I am a men's grief coach. I have been for 6 years. I have a nonprofit, Memories of Us, where I provide space for men to come in and be supported by other men, learn how to articulate as we navigate the world of grief, trauma, mental health, and addiction, which actually leads me into a lot of other work that I do. I'm a podcaster, have been for 4 years. My podcast is called Grief Let's Talk About It Podcast. People can follow it on YouTube. I also am the host of the conference, the Global Grief Conference, which I started back in 2022. And I started that to provide services for individuals who otherwise wouldn't know that those services, that we were there to provide that support that they need, which leads me into my next organization, the Global Grief Network, which is a network full of grief practitioners like ourselves to be able to network, collaborate, talk, and have some fun with each other. And Just build an amazing community of people who are heart centered that want to do a lot more in the world. And also, I am a two-time author. One of my books is an international bestseller. The other book is on its way to becoming a bestseller. I am the editor-in-chief of the magazine, Grief Talk Magazine, where I feature articles from individuals like yourself, Mir, that provide helpful tips for people who are navigating the world of grief, trauma, and mental health. And it also features events and podcasts and letters that people write in just to add an extra layer of support for those who are grieving. I am a guest speaker, so I do travel around guest speaking, educating people on how to hold space with men who are in their life and have a better understanding of what we go through. And Part of my journey, so a very brief glimpse into it. I am the survivor of childhood molestation. I was molested twice by the age of 6 and by my neighbor's son. And that changed the trajectory of my life because I started off before that time. I just wanted to be an artist. I wanted to do cartoons. I wanted to do comic books. I wanted to draw people and just live a normal life, But I guess in a way, my life was normal. Just came with a lot of twists and turns along the way. I was raised by both of my parents, mom and dad. I have my younger sister, um, but I was different. I was totally different. It changed me, and at an early age, I began to understand how life really worked from where I was from, that it wasn't going to be easy, that I had to learn how to survive, and that no one was going to come and save me. So I lived a double life. On one hand, I'm a straight A student in school. I'm my mom and dad's son. I am the typical kid that you would see running around, skateboarding, riding bikes, and playing with my friends, and mowing grandmother's lawn, and taking people's trash out because that's what we was taught to do. I was very respectful, but on the other side, I became a very I became very strategic in life at an early age. I understood that in order for me to survive, I was going to have to be something different. So I was attracted to the people who was out there selling drugs and gang banging and drinking and all of those different things at an early age. And I wanted to understand, how can I do this?
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
But also how can I do it and keep it away from my mom and my dad because they was going to whip my little butt. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't have that. So at an early age, I started selling drugs. And by the time I was 15, I became one of the youngest and biggest drug dealers in the state of Virginia at the time. And I came after 4 years of doing that. I finally got busted. They tried to give me 266 years, but my mother had found out a couple of days prior, and so she kind of taught me how to protect myself against that, which I did, and which led me to leaving home at a very early age. Moved to another state, went to Job Corps, And it was the time of my life. I started boxing. I was teaching karate. I was taking kung fu. I found my love of bodybuilding at that time, running track, playing football. I was working for the U.S. Department of Labor. I was drawing for the local magazine. I got my GED and also got my certification in business management. And during that course of time, I met my daughter's mom at the time, my oldest daughter's mom at the time. And at the age of 17, I had my first kid. We moved from Washington, D.C. to Colorado in 1992. And I would say that that was a happy time in my life, but it was a mixture because although I am a new father, life kind of changed up on me because it took me right back into a lifestyle that I tried to get away from, which was the games. And I had to make a hard decision, which led me into having to walk away from my daughter because my life became very difficult at a very, so I had to do what was right to keep her safe from the life that I was going to embark on. And I didn't understand that I was going to do it, but I knew instinctively that this is what needed to happen. So I made the hard choice and I told her mother, take my daughter, you guys get away from me. And she did. She moved, she took my daughter to a different state, which today my daughter is a very successful young lady. She was raised by an amazing, amazing man. And she now lives the life that she's meant to live. And during that course of time, I became the poster child for a gangbanger. So I'm a former Crip. I was a Crip for over 24 years.
Mhm.
Um, I went to prison in 1994 for a crime I never committed. But I was thankful because they didn't catch me for what I did. So I spent 5 years in prison. I spent two of those 5 years in solitary confinement. I got out in 1999. In early 2000, I was shot 22 times, which led me into a more deeper road of chaos and trauma and addiction. Not drugs or anything like that, but alcohol. I was an alcoholic for over 20 years. And I would say I barely survived because during that course of time, I lost 400 plus of my friends and I watched them all die. I ended up losing all of my grandparents. I lost some uncles, some aunts, some cousins, which led me into a really bad whirlwind because during that course of time, I was homeless, which eventually led me into leaving the gangs and which led to one of the worst stints of homelessness that I ever experienced. It was 2.5 years, and
Mhm.
I went from making all of this money to having nothing, and I was determined not to go back to it. So I endured what I needed to endure, and it sounds exactly that. I was the guy that after losing everything, I was sleeping in abandoned buildings, trash cans, underneath bridges. I was eating out of trash cans, but I never begged anybody for anything. I always said I got myself into this, so I'm going to get myself out. And I never ran home to my mom and dad because I didn't want them to see me the way that I was. And eventually, eventually, um, I found my way through, and which led me into another section of life where it became more interesting and began to work for a temporary agency,
Mhm.
making $48 a day. And I built myself up from there. Unfortunately, being an alcoholic, you kind of attract other alcoholics, which led me into losing everything over and over and over again through that process. I met some amazing people along the way. I really have. And people who genuinely cared about me, but I still had an issue. Um, because of the damage that was done to me during the time of being a gangbanger and being homelessness and being homeless. And all of the reckless relationships I had. But I had to hold myself accountable at some point and say it wasn't them, it was me. It wasn't, they wasn't the toxic one, I was. And so that is a hard truth. Um, and it was something that I had to look into as I got older, and which led me into another place. I ended up spending a year in prison in Arizona for trafficking of marijuana, only to come back and be homeless again. I lost everything again. And so, which took me along another journey of back and forthness and meeting one of my best friends and taking me in, which led me into going from there, meeting another guy, finally getting into my own place when I was in my 30s, my early 30s. And I was still an alcoholic, but I was working a very good job, but I had my own place. And I became the king of one night stands, so to speak. You know, I was like, no commitment. Okay, cool. Let's do it. And which led me into meeting my son's mother. And this was 2006, late 2006. And she became pregnant. I am moving out of my home, moving to another place in Colorado. She gave birth to our son Jake in 2007, December 18th of 2007, which led me into quitting alcohol,
Mhm.
saying to myself, I'm going to be a father. I need to do this. I need to concentrate on doing this and becoming a better man.
Mhm.
And what I didn't know is that I didn't know what was coming after that. And I quickly realized that after she gave birth, that she was the narcissist. And yeah, which led into another interesting part of my life because when she and I separated, I became homeless again. And she destroyed my life the rest of the way. She ripped me down to the bare bone, keeping my son away from me for 2.5 years, which eventually grace bestowed upon me. And I eventually got my son after getting into a new place.
Mhm.
And and I became, I became the father that I knew I could be. And I became the man that I knew I could be only by following, I'm not very religious, but I began to follow God because that was the only role model that I ever known. And I knew that I wanted that. I wanted to I wanted to be a better person, a better human being in this world. And so I was blessed in two ways. I began to follow the guideline that was given to me by God. And my son taught me how to be a good father to him. He taught me how to be his father. And so it was the best time of my life. And so for the next 5 years after that, I had the time of my life. It was very, very beautiful watching him grow into the young man and the laughter and the adventures that we went on. He taught me how to see life through his eyes. And in October 31st, 2015, he had suffered a major overdose because his pharmacist mixed his medication wrong. Now, before I get into that, I want to back up a little bit because during that course of time, I lost my dad and my younger brother,
Well,
which, trying to navigate that as well. And then having this thing happen, the mistreatment from the hospitals and not understanding what all of that meant. But he eventually came out of it and we took him off the medication.
mhm.
He lived a very happy life from there.
Mhm.
And 9 months later, June 16th of 2016, I watched my son pass away from unknown causes. That was a that was a really hard blow because it did change the trajectory of how I looked at God because I was very angry, very angry. And then 2 years later, July 25th, which is coming up this month, I lost my mother. So they determined not to be whooped by life. I began to think I thought I was making the best decisions, but I was making the wrong decisions, which led me into a very toxic relationship with a female that actually I found out was a racist. I ended up losing everything, my company, my personal training company, and I had to navigate that. And life whooped me pretty good. It whooped me up pretty good, and eventually led me into planning out my own suicide. And I said, I just didn't want to do life anymore. I really didn't. But the blessing came from that because in that moment where I was about to take my life, that voice came back, and it began to help me connect the dots, and it showed me my life. And although I saw the chaos and the trauma and the abuse and the alcoholism, I didn't see the people that I met along the way, the people that I was able to impact, the journey. Even though I was homeless, it's the journey of getting there, of getting to this moment. And I began to see the blessing in it. And that's where the gift of grief showed up. And it began to give me knowledge and wisdom and forgiveness. And it slowed me down enough to where I became grateful of the process that I was going through. And I began to get excited about it. And I wanted to know more about it, which now this is 2019. And I realized that I couldn't let it go, that there was something more to it, which led me into becoming a men's grief coach. And in 2020, it's what sparked this path. And I've been staying true to it ever since then. And I began to build everything from the ground up, where although I didn't know anything or have any mentors, I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. And so I did. And I've been on that path ever since then, which led me into everything else that I do to this day.
Wow, that's quite a journey. And while you were going through sharing all the things that you have been through, Tony, I was just thinking, is there anything this guy hasn't been through? And it's and I gotta say, Tony, it's an inspiration. And I mean, I am so glad to have met you. You are such a wonderful human being. You're such an amazing
Thank you.
person. And you have this lovely energy, Tony. And again, now I am more respect for you, Tony, after hearing all you had to go through. I mean, this is so much to take in one lifetime. I really, really appreciate the courage you showed, the resilience you had with you all the time. I mean, I'm speechless, Tony. I'm speechless.
Thank
So
you.
I do have to ask that during this journey, if I ask you what would be the turning point for you in your life that led to you becoming the person that you are today, what would be the turning point?
It was the darkness.
Hmm.
But it's a multi-layered answer because there was several turning points
Okay.
that led to the path that I was on. Then I didn't understand it. It was the understanding that I was different,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, that I viewed life in a different way. It was the childhood molestation. It was watching all of the people that I knew die. It was the homelessness. It was the alcoholism. It was the sitting there in the middle of the desert, about ready to pull a trigger to take my own life. It was the meeting of all of these interesting people along the way, the knowledge that they shared with me that I didn't understand, right? It was the people who took me in when they didn't have to. It was the journey. It was the multi versions of myself along the way that I look back now and I see the many people that I was able to be a part of their lives and the children I was able to watch grow, right? It was the experience. of it that led me to here. It was the aha moment of saying, there's more to this. And it was the curiosity that I had after that moment of saying, where is this going to take me? And what can I do to help others like myself? So although I began to work with men because I understood that there was nothing out there for us, and the determination to just wanting to learn from other men who have experienced it, and I wanted to know how they navigated it, and then life's turning it back around and said, no, they're not here, you're not here for them, they're here for you. And it's time to embrace that walk and being obedient to the journey and being submissive to the process that I had to go through, but also listening to the guidance that it was giving me and wanting to know more about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that it was a sequence of events that led me here.
Okay, so Tony, you have shared the losses that you have faced during the journey, and people you have lost, including your son. So I really have to say that as a man, have you felt the pressure to stay strong or grieve in a certain way? And if so, how did that affect your healing?
I did in the beginning of the process because I was the one that people always came to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Even after I lost my son, people didn't understand that my world had been falling apart. And so, but they always wanted to come to me and and ask me questions and dump their stuff on me. So I did have a sense of responsibility to remain strong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it did affect my healing in the sense of in many ways. But the main way, what it did that I didn't understand till later on, is that these individuals that were still coming to me, looking at me like I was strong, it gave me a sense of purpose, which aligned to everything that I was doing, that I do today, right? Because I was like, why are you people dumping all of this stuff on me, right? Do you not understand that I'm going through something right now, but I didn't understand what they were doing. And so I was able to, once I started on this path, I was able to use that in a way to become a servant. And how it affected my healing, it boosted it because it fast tracked me. It made me more curious of why people was attracted to me because I never looked at myself as anything special or anything like that. I was just another man out here just trying to make it, just trying to survive. But surviving turned into thriving.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to see life in a different way. And recently it changed on me. And I said, you know what? In order for me to get to the next step, I'm going to have to let this go. And I'm going to have to accept the next phase of my evolution. And so as a man, it affected me in different ways because it taught me how to be more self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
to become more emotionally aware,
Mm-hmm.
to become more emotionally intelligent, to learn how to articulate, but to also be honest with myself and to be honest with other people. And which led me into trusting myself a lot more and trusting what I was going through and listening to my soul when it said I needed to do something. Although I didn't understand it, I trusted it. And so it was the process.
Yeah.
It was the process, and I fell in love with it. And grief it became my mentor. It became my first love because it was honest. It was honest and truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know more about it.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
thank you so much for sharing all this, Tony. So now I have a question that since you work with men mostly, so what would you say are some challenges that men face when they come to you for grief support?
The main challenge is understanding that what we're going through is totally normal.
Mm.
It's because men are taught to be strong. We're taught to be providers and protectors, right? And so we're not taught to open up. We're taught to suppress, not express. And
Yeah.
so when men, I'll be 51 this year. As a man, the biggest thing is saying, I'm hurt. I'm hurting right now. And I just need you to hold space with me. Most men don't know how to do that because we don't want people to feel as if we're weak. And the biggest thing is that we don't want to lose value in other people's lives because deep down inside we want to feel needed, right? We want you to know that no matter what, I'm still going to be here for you. And so there's a disconnect because if we don't know how to articulate what's really going on with us, it leaves the door open for assumption. And so if you have to assume what's going on with me, your assumption is going to be wrong because you don't understand the language of what's actually going on with me. And so until I can be totally honest with myself, I can't be totally honest with you. So that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. So, what would you say to a father who's grieving the loss of a child and feels completely lost right now?
Take your time. Take your time. Surround yourself with other men that are going through something similar. Be honest with yourself. And most importantly, learn to articulate, learn to verbalize what you're feeling. It's okay because you're a human being and what you're feeling is totally normal.
Absolutely.
And
And
let others walk beside you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if I ask you, what's one thing you wish more people understood about grief?
It is the deepest human connection that you can have with another person.
Yes,
It's love. It's unconditional love
absolutely.
because it involves deep empathy. It involves you allowing another person to experience your emotions on such a different level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I ask, if I can ask you an emotional one, Tony, if your son could see you now and the work that you're doing, what do you think he'd say or feel?
I think he would look at me and say, thank you, Dad, for the life that you've given me.
Totally.
And I would say to him, thank you for the blessing that you've given me, for giving me a second chance at this.
So true. Beautiful. So,
Yeah.
Tony, tell me, how can people reach you? What's the best way to contact you, get in touch with you?
Yeah, people can go to my website, www.mensgriefsupport.org. You can find me on Instagram as Men's Grief Support. You can find me on Facebook on many different places. As Tony Lynch, you can find my Men's Grief Support group, Memories of Us. You can find if you're looking for if you're a grief practitioner, join the group, the Global Grief Network. We would love to welcome you there as well. Connect with other people. You can find me on Instagram. I mean, not Instagram, but LinkedIn as Tony Lynch. And if you're into graphic novels, I just started the graphic novels, The Adventures of Grief Guy. You can find that Facebook page up there and stay up to date on everything. You can find my YouTube channel, which is Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Tony, for taking the time out to be here. It's such a pleasure having you
of
here.
course.